Pull up a chair. There's something I've been wanting to talk about for a while now. Up here in the attic, tucked between old Life magazines and a stack of postcards that still smell faintly like someone's grandmother's perfume, I keep finding these little relics. Advice columns, etiquette booklets, dating guides printed on paper so thin you're almost afraid to touch them. And every single time I open one, I think, we lost something real here. Not everything, mind you. Some things from the 1950s stayed buried for good reason. But the dating rules? The way women were taught to carry themselves, to communicate, to actually be with another person, there's more wisdom in those faded pages than most modern apps could ever code into an algorithm. So today, that's what we're going into. The dating rules that quietly vanished. The ones that got labeled old-fashioned and thrown out right along with the baby and the bathwater. The slow art of being pursued in 1955, a Gallup survey found that over 75% of American women believed a man should be the one to initiate courtship. Now, before anyone rolls their eyes, this wasn't about weakness. It was about discernment. The rule wasn't sit and wait. The rule was don't make yourself so available that there's nothing left to discover. Women were coached to let a man work a little, not to play cruel games, but to allow genuine interest to build over time. There's actually behavioral psychology behind this. Researchers at the University of Virginia found that uncertainty in early attraction, not knowing for certain whether someone likes you, significantly increases romantic interest. The 1950s woman didn't have that study. She just knew it instinctively. Contrast that with today, where the average response time to a text message is under 90 seconds. We've engineered all the mystery out of it. The phone call discipline. Here's one that genuinely surprises people. In 1950s dating culture, there was an unspoken rule about phone calls. They had a shape. They weren't marathon sessions. They were purposeful. A man called to make a plan. A woman received the call graciously, kept it warm, but not endless, and the conversation ended before it ever got tired. This was considered good manners. But it was also something else entirely. It kept both people wanting more. Modern couples report spending an average of 4.4 hours per day on their phones while in the same room together, according to a 2022 Assyrian study. We have infinite access to each other, and somehow we've never felt more disconnected. The 1950s version of restraint wasn't deprivation. It was curation. Dressing intentionally, not impressively. There's a difference, and the women of that era understood it completely. The rule wasn't about wearing your best dress to dazzle. It was about dressing in a way that communicated. I took this seriously. A 1957 Charm magazine guide put it plainly. Your appearance on a date sends a message before you speak a single word. The question was always, what message do you want to send? This is actually supported by modern research. A 2015 study published in Social, Psychological, and Personality Science found that clothing directly affects not just how others perceive you, but how you perceive yourself, your confidence, your sense of authority. They called it enclothed cognition. The 1950s girl already knew this. She just called it self-respect. The thank you that meant something. A handwritten thank you note after a date. Sounds almost quaint now, doesn't it? But think about what that actually communicated. It said, I was present. I noticed the effort you made. You are worth the time it takes me to sit down and write this. Emily Post, whose etiquette guide sold over 1 million copies in 1950 alone, was emphatic. Gratitude expressed in writing carried 10 times the weight of the same words spoken. Today, a thumbs up emoji has replaced that entirely. I'm not saying we all need to buy stationery, but the principle underneath it, the act of deliberate, specific acknowledgement, that's not outdated. That's just rare now. Guarding emotional privacy, this one is subtle, and it might be the most important. Women in the 1950s were taught not to overshare in the early stages of dating, not because emotions were shameful, but because depth was something you earned access to. You revealed yourself gradually. You watched how someone handled small pieces of your world before handing them the whole thing. There's a reason therapists today talk about emotional flooding as one of the primary relationship killers. Researcher John Gottman, who has studied couples for over 4 decades, identifies contempt and emotional overwhelm as the fastest predictors of relationship failure. When you hand someone everything in the first 2 weeks, there's nowhere left to go. The 1950s rule wasn't about hiding who you were. It was about building trust as the foundation for vulnerability, not the other way around. The art of graceful disagreement, somewhere along the way, we confused having standards with being confrontational. The women of that era were taught something different, how to disagree without dismantling. If a date said something she found distasteful, the proper response wasn't to erupt and wasn't to go silent either. It was a calm, composed redirection. A raised eyebrow, a measured, I see it a bit differently, and then a pivot toward more common ground. This takes skill. It's not suppression, it's emotional intelligence operating at a very high level. Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, published in 1936 and still selling 250,000 copies annually as of 2020, is essentially a modern manual for exactly this kind of approach. The 1950s woman didn't need the book. She'd been practicing since finishing school. Here's what I keep coming back to. These rules weren't invented to diminish women. The ones worth keeping, the mystery, the intentionality, the emotional discipline, the gratitude, those were a form of power. Quiet power. The kind that doesn't announce itself. We threw out a lot in the name of progress. Some of it needed throwing out. But some of it, these particular things, we let go because they seemed old, not because they stopped working. A 2023 study from the Survey Center on American Life found that Americans report having fewer close relationships than any generation measured in the past 30 years. We have more ways to connect than ever. And somehow, the connections feel thinner. Maybe it's worth asking what we actually left behind up in the attic. Not to go back, but to remember that some things age into wisdom. They don't just age out of relevance. If something here hit close to home, drop a comment. Tell me which one surprised you most. And if you know someone who still lives by rules like these, or someone who could use a few of them, share this with her. The attic's always open.